So, David, tonight our main goal is to hit this segment and try to bring to the general public with any mental health suggestions and issues that you think that you've come across in your stories or in some of your talks on TED Talks on depression, anxiety, dealing with adolescents and adults. So if you have any special stories
Absolutely.
that could help people.
I appreciate the opportunity because I think the number one problem that we have today is a happiness problem. And that happiness problem is not just about chemical problem, it is a perspective problem. And we see so many different things. I work from all different ages. You know, when I started doing research on mental health and wellness, it was so surprising that, you know, the number one cause of death of people from 35 to 55 now is actually suicide, right? It's the fastest growing way to die. The depression and anxiety of college students, for example, 30 years ago, 10% of college students who graduated were depressed, anxious, or suicidal. Today, 90% of college graduates are depressed, anxious, or suicidal. So we have a true happiness problem. And I think what happens over the last decade is that all of our institutions, and I think technology has a lot to do with this, have changed dramatically. So our financial institutions, our political institutions, our educational, our healthcare, all of those have changed dramatically. And the separation that's occurred has a true effect on the perspective of the individuals that causes a lot of anxiety, stress, depression, which leads to suicide. To that, we have to look at the solutions that are available. And I think outside of medication, which is the quick, easy fix, which now we have found that the medication that's been given is addictive and actually contributes more to anxiety, depression, and suicide than anything else with the opiate addiction that we have in America today. I look more on the understanding of the conscious, subconscious, and unconscious mind. What actually allows us to be happy? So we're going to start with the reverse of what most people think is your genetics. Mm-hmm. I think we ignore the fact that some people are born, we have a quantum memory and unconscious competency that includes our personality traits, our characteristics, our obsessions and addictions. So just like we've seen alcoholism and abuse and other things carried down from 4 generations, great-grandparents, grandparents, parents to us, the same holds true with depression and anxiety. And so one of the key indicators is through the genetic dispositions that we have, as well as history, is understanding what is our family history with depression, anxiety, and even suicide. Because once we realize that we have a quantum memory or a DNA that's more susceptible to depression, anxiety, and suicide, then we can deal with that to shift that through, believe it or not, there's an epigenetic layer of the DNA that you can activate and deactivate your own DNA. And we can start working on shifting that energy or that frequency. So how do we do that? Well, we have to start with behavior. And we need to have consistent behavior in order for the human system from the conscious to the subconscious to the unconscious to work. The problem that occurs is that our cellular structure, and this is how, whether, you know, I come from the sports agency background and we're not going to talk and discuss too much about football, but it's truly the consistency of the hits that cause problems with the brain, for example, right? It's not just one big hit. That's not what causes it. It's the consistency. In fact, shaking the brain like this in a consistent nature would have just as much effect as pounding your head like this in a consistent nature. But why has that occurred? Because your human body has a cellular memory. Unfortunately, the cellular memory that we have in the conscious level is extremely stupid. This conscious memory that I have, it forgets everything from the time I open my eyes till the time I close it in a day. So the consistency is what creates an input. The problem with the input is that it's based on my senses, you know, what I touch, see, hear, smell, and those are completely inaccurate. So on the positive side, we need to have a consistent behavior. But on the negative side, we have more negative consistency than positive. Positive behavior is proactive, where negative is reactive. So what happens in the human body is we're relying on these false senses And the other half is our memory, which is also inaccurate. So we're giving bad data at all times. So if we're proactive in thinking about positive results, we're going to have inaccurate data, but our reactive data is towards the negative side. So we're consistently reinforcing negative behavior into the subconscious because the input that we have every day, the 10,000 new thoughts that we have every day, are what contribute to the 40,000 of the same thoughts that exist in the subconscious.
Now you played ball and not
College.
played ball. So what do you think from speaking to other professionals? Why is it that all of a sudden now I've been diagnosed with post-TBI and I'm feeling the symptoms and effects of CTE, where you probably took the same amount of blows, and why is it that you're not having those effects?
Well, we don't know if I took the same amount of blows and the same type of concurrent behavior, because we have to, in recovery, right, part of the brain trauma that occurs from hitting, whether we played football, basketball, boxing, whatever it is that we played, in the consistency, I think we didn't let our brains heal. So I may have taken bigger hits than you, right? As a punt returner, as a 147-pound cornerback in high school, in college, but I may have just allowed myself to recover before I took another hit.
Oh, okay.
Right? And so, but beyond that, I still think this idea of the conscious, the subconscious, the unconscious, genetically, you might have a higher disposition. You know, there's people who smoke cigarettes, which have been proven to be fairly bad for you. Mm-hmm. You know, my father, for example, smoked 3 packs of cigarettes from the time he was 14 until the time he died. You know, he lived off of candy. You know, genetically, my 2 grandfathers lived to 97. I'm not quite sure all the abuse that they took.
Right.
So just like there's some people that never smoke get lung cancer, just off of secondhand smoke, and other people can smoke 3 packs a day, I think that it's so difficult right now to understand our genetic activation, right? The chromosomes we have, the DNA. So when we're trying to figure this out, I think in order to understand where we're at, we have to take this baseline test. And that's what, you know, as I work with Lee Steinberg and ran the most notable sports agency in the world, I have always leaned towards creating a baseline test, because I think that's the best way to determine what damage we're doing.
Now, when you're talking the baseline test, are you talking about the neuropsych test?
Yes.
Okay. So
Yeah.
then that's where, when they were searching with me originally, I knew something was wrong with my head, but we couldn't find out what x-rays came back fine, CAT scans came back fine. They did a history, and it was because I had pretty much, a lot of the neurologists didn't even know what CTE was.
Right.
This was only 4 years ago, after the Will Smith movie, Concussion, and you would think, wow, you know, it should be everywhere. But now they are getting deeper into the, they say, well, if we can match up the neuropsych test with the MRI, we could get a closer observation of the tau proteins. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
And any disparities that have occurred. So the earlier too that we can get a baseline test on young athletes to see what changes have occurred as well, can contribute to stopping CTE, the plaques that build up on our brains, and other things that we don't understand still. As you know, it's evolutionary. The good news is through quantum computing, like the Watson and other things that we have, we're going to be able to determine, because of the processing speed and the amount of data that we can now examine. That's why cancer cures are coming faster. Correct. You know, and so will brain cures as well, because we can really analyze and get deeper into the data very quickly and process it beyond what the human capacity was, even with our brightest minds. And so quantum computing is going to really contribute to solving this problem and figuring out, one, how to be aware or diagnose it, and then to cure it. Because right now, it's in its infancy. So as you know, Paolo, from just your own personal experience, we're still guessing.
Yes.
Right? They can name it whatever they want to name it. They can talk about whatever they want to talk about. But there is a brain malfunction going on, a damage to the brain that may, as we look back 100 years, what we used to, you know, people always say, how come there wasn't so much cancer 100 years ago? Well, they didn't know it was cancer, right? Because there's no way to determine what the cellular structure was.
Right.
Now, we're getting so deep into the brain and understanding how it works, there will be an awareness of what it is, ability to diagnose it, and then once they create that data, they'll be able to create a cure for it in a much more expedient manner.
Do you think this is an offset question? That I do a lot of, when I was a little bit stronger, I did a lot of, worked with a lot of philanthropy with underserved communities, trying to keep the kids out of jail because I knew there was a lot of mental illness and trying to get to them early before they got into a lot of the problems because they had, usually 90% of the kids came from single households and they're dealing with trauma at a really early age. So if you combine because I never drank a beer, never had a cigarette until I never had a cigarette ever.
Me neither.
I never drank a beer until I was 25 and I got sick as a dog. And then, at 30 years old, I had a traumatic experience. And then all of a sudden, I started getting some of the symptoms of CTE. And that was probably about 20 years after my last concussion. Do you think there could be any correlation from the maybe in the past from some of our youth? Because football is getting such a bad rap, right? That's what's happening. Yeah. Everyone says, oh, I don't want my son or daughter playing football. And I just think that it's, I boxed, I wrestled, and I played rugby, and I played a lot of contact sports. So those concussions came from a variety of different areas. So you can't blacklist one certain thing. So that's why I was thinking of how do we kind of correct it and make the game. I was watching the Pro Bowl, and they were rapping.
Right.
It was a totally different game.
Yeah,
it was like,
you couldn't bring anybody down.
It was going through there. But I guess circling back to my question is, do you think there's anything with the upbringing and the way the mind is developing with kids at an earlier age, and then as they start getting wrapped in the head in certain circumstances, that could be contributing to some of the brain disease?
Absolutely. So any brain trauma, okay, it could be from slipping and falling to playing ping pong and hitting your head on the table. It wouldn't matter. You and I both know that football gets the bad rap because they have the most money and the most popularity. Okay. So, but the objective and the intent, I believe, is great, and it's to protect kids from ending up like you are right now, right? It's to stop brain trauma in whatever activities there are. So whether you're riding bikes or playing lacrosse or playing MMA, that we should have the, number one, appropriate equipment, and then two, the appropriate analysis or awareness or diagnosis in order to have the appropriate recovery. And so, you don't want to live your entire life in a bubble. You and I both were, athletes who like collision sports. And I don't, my son will play tackle football, but if he has a hit that's seen, I will pull him out of the game for weeks until somebody tells me that his brain is fully healed. Because there's some risks that we always take. I live in California the minute we get into the freeway. Okay. So the minute you get on a freeway is the most risky thing that you could ever do. So, you got to live your life to the fullest.
We'll have to take a break, and we'll be back in a few minutes. Thank you. I would make an appointment before the season, the spring season, or whenever it is, have a sit down with the athletic director. Let me feel the criteria. What is the criteria of the stuff? What is the resume of the coaches coaching my sport? What is right now? I know I coached junior high down here in South Florida for about 2 months. They made us take a test of concussion protocol, and I actually disagreed with the whole test. I got 100 on it. It's probably the only 100 I ever got in school. But the coaches, all the kids, we all love contact. We all love the excitement, the macho, the testosterone, and they would have these kids 6th grade years old doing the Oklahoma drills, banging, clear the block, making the tackle, which to me is completely useless. So I had a thought process of saying, listen, if we could take to the fundamentals, still keep the same fun set of the game, and maybe do it in a flag setting or in a rough touch setting, but really teach the techniques. And then when they get closer to the JV and varsity levels and the tackling end, then we really introduced that and now limited the contact as well as changing the practice routines. What would be your thoughts on changing and reducing the concussions?
Absolutely, and I think, if you look at Dartmouth, for example, they won the Ivy Leagues, and they were the first college team ever to have no tackling in practice. Forget Nebraska and Oklahoma drills where we're just banging each other's head, which is the way that we learn football, right? To learn to be tough. The leadership qualities, the characteristics, the things that made you successful from playing football, which is what makes it the most popular sport 2-1 in America. That aspect of leadership, of having heart and grit, does not mean you need to bang your head against each other. It doesn't mean you need to be blindsided or crack back on, or even, forget your head, certain things with your back, knees, and neck that can be also saved now through education and proper procedure and technique. So absolutely, I think the game of football, as you see flag football growing, which has far less contact, it's still a very exciting way to learn how to be a leader, how to play on a team, how to be inspired, how to learn to lose. Right? I was a defensive back. I always tell people, what a great thing to learn rejection. Because if you know what it's like to be one-on-one, man-to-man, and get toasted, and then have to come back again. Right. That's what life's about. Yeah. Getting toasted and coming back and doing better the next time and still winning the game. Keep on. My college football coach had a great saying, right? Keep on playing. And I have made an extraordinary career out of teaching people to enjoy the consistent, persistent pursuit of their potential. Basically, I'm teaching people to keep on playing.
When you're doing some of your lectures with business, do you ever do analogies from sports and competitive to relate into the business world?
All the time. So whether it's Warren Moon, who had to spend 6 years in Canada because he was an African American quarterback, or even in my own office when we're very blessed to have, I think, front office or somebody voted us the top place to work, most desirable sports firm to work at. I tell people, treat this place as if you were Rudy wanting to play football at Notre Dame, right? That's desire. Or, even myself is, I've gone through in my own personal life some real highs and real lows, and worked so hard. I, just wanted to be rich when I was young, to buy my mom a house and a car. And imagine losing over $100 million and having to tell your mom not only that you went bankrupt, but you lost her house because you forgot to take it out of her name. Talk about depression, anxiety. But Rocky, who has just this tremendous story about how actually Sylvester Stallone made the movie, and the movie itself pulled me out of the depression, because I literally sat there and saying, if you can look up, you can get up.
Now that could be a great transition point for us to pivot to, because we just touched on the CTE, which is one of our main causes that we want, our concussions that we want to really project. But when you were faced with this challenge of, was it going bankrupt at that age? Mm-hmm. So you obviously you went to law school. I don't know.
I was with Lee. I was running the most notable sports agency in the world, trying to teach athletes not to lose everything. I was terrified that Lee and Warren Moon, who was my business partner, were going to fire me, because what type of example could I lead after losing all my money to athletes? Walking into living rooms saying, "Don't worry, I'm going to take care of your son."
But what I wanted to know is that I have to work if I do it, and this has nothing to do with CTE.
Sure.
As I'm dyslexic, so if you had to do a paper, you probably knock it out in 5 minutes. Was academics pretty easy for you?
Yeah.
So you were really caught between that. That was your main goal.
I was born with a quantum memory. My siblings all never got to be
photographic as well.
Just like Lee, in different things, though. It's funny because people ask, Lee, for example, Lee Steinberg, who's one of my mentors, he can read an entire book in a day and tell you what was on page 394.
Wow.
Where my real gift of photographic memory is to remember, I can have 100 employees and I'll know every single person's action item list better than they do. So I'm a difficult person to work for because if you walk into my office, I'll say, "What about? Have you finished this?" And it's like, "Oh no, nobody wants to walk by my
You want to
office."
say it once and have them do it. You don't want them to ask them twice.
Exactly.
I told you how many times I have to tell you, but you want to be respectful at the same time.
Of course.
Okay.
And that's why I became a value-based leader, teaching people values in order, my mission in life and why I'm doing this with you, because I think it's so important, is to empower or impact at least 1,000 people in my lifetime, to impact 1,000 people, to impact 1,000 people to be happy. And this is one of the vehicles. You're one of those people that can impact 1,000 people to impact 1,000 people. 1,000 times 1,000 is a million times 1,000 is a billion. Just doing the math, to me, if I can change the world by impacting or inspiring people like you, and you inspiring other people just to be happy, educating themselves on CTE, but also on the process of anxiety.
All right, David, so we're going to finish up, and this is a very interesting storyline that I wanted to find out more about. So I can't picture myself in your situation. So you, at the top of your life, everything's going well. You had your golf course. You had a great family. You went in, and however the cards played out, they didn't go on. And it was it a year and a half you were at Steinberg Sports?
Was at Steinberg for almost 3 years. But
3
yeah.
years.
Yeah.
So then the transition went out, and was it like most relationships? It's ugly. Break up, and then you say, okay, let's mend the fences, or were you able to slowly come back?
I was lucky to have a business partner, Warren Moon, as well, to help heal that. But Lee, going through the challenges that he had while I was going through the stress and anxiety that I had, it was very tenuous. And alcoholism itself is a disease which people go below the line, and then I had a lot of stress. So it had to heal itself, and like anything else, I was forgiving of myself and of Lee, and I think that has helped us over the years. I've always been here to help Lee, still help Lee, right. And Warren absolutely always helps Lee as well. So for me, hitting rock bottom was interesting, because about 2 years before I hit rock bottom is when I went through a transformation of my perception, right, of a mindset change. So I was more prepared when I lost everything. What really put me into a depression was Lee's alcoholism and my wife wanting to leave me, because I was surrounding myself with the wrong people and the wrong ideas when I got into this person. Yeah, and so, I got angry. I was living in blame, shame, and justification, and it hit me, I would say, when I realized that I was just like my father. Right, I was a manipulator, an overseller, a liar, a back-end seller, and once I became accountable, I was able to heal and start working on my own self. But when I was living in blame, shame, and justification, I was angry, frustrated, anxious, depressed, and I was able to turn it around by living with gratitude, forgiveness, and accountability. And working really hard every day. It didn't happen overnight. That's what I was talking about for anyone. You have to manage the expectations that it's a day-to-day fight. It's that 1% better that really makes it happen. And if slowly but surely you have the right input through that conscious continuum that we talked about, that we do and treat people with kindness, especially ourselves, sooner or later, not only do you turn around your mental attitude, but everything else follows. And I've been able to, over the last 11 years, recover far beyond I've ever dreamed of. I live an extraordinary life with my same wife, and 4 children now, and wealth and health all exist because I was able to do that day to day.
That's awesome. Would you say you're the happiest right now?
Absolutely.
In your life?
Best day of my life is today, and tomorrow's going to be even better.
Okay, and before we close out, and for the last segment, where's your next step going? Is it going to be writing more novels, best-selling novels?
It's all
continuing this pace.
It's all with capturing, amplifying, perpetuating, helping other people. So it's books, podcasts, TV shows, movies. All the things that I'm doing are to inspire other people to inspire other people.
Well, I hope you keep on staying in touch with us and joining our campaign. And you're a true blessing to have on as a mentor, and I see for your staff. And this has really been a true pleasure.
It's an honor to be here.
Thank you,
Thank you,
sir.
Paul. Appreciate it.
Appreciate it.